Morning, everyone. Just gonna do as I always do and wait for a couple of seconds. So welcome to this week's Learn With Lorna, number 44 in the series. Hello to everyone already saying hello. If you're joining us for the first time, please say hello. You'll find that we've formed a wee group of a wee community, a wee group of friends who all say hello every morning. So if you're joining for the first time, say hello and where you are. For those of you who don't know, my name is Lorna Steele, and I am the Community Engagement Officer for the Highland Archive Service. The Highland Archive Service has 4 archive centres across the Highlands. We have an office in Inverness, which the Highland Archive Centre, which is our hub office. We also have other repositories and archive centres in Wick, in Portree and in Fort William. So 4 archive centres across the Highlands that make up the Highland Archive Service. Before I go any further into this talk, I'm going to start, as I always do, by reminding you that this series is brought to you by High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer. That High Life Highland is a charity registered in Scotland, and that there's no payment or subscription required to take part in these events. But if you're able to donate towards our work, we are very appreciative of those of you who have been able to do that. It enables us to carry on doing events. It enables us to carry on looking after the wonderful collections that we care for. So thank you so much to those of you who've been able to do that. If you would like to, there's a link to be able to do that within the text of this film. When we started doing these talks, I started doing these 10 months ago. And obviously I had, although I thought it kind of might be a long haul till we got back to normal, it's very perhaps unexpected that we still don't have people in our buildings. We have been open on and off as government restrictions have allowed, but we're still not able to operate as we would normally. And so although my main aim with these talks and what I really would love to get across to you is the excitement of handling original archive material and coming in and getting your hands on things, and also to show that it's absolutely vital to know that everything is not online. A vast amount of information lies within archive centres across the country and across the world. What I wanted to do at this point is give you some pointers to interesting, useful resources online that you can use, some which I use day in, day out. So you'll hear, as you'll be used to by now, an absolutely vast amount of excitement on my part about some of these websites. And so I just wanted to share some of those things with you. So maybe you're not able to get into our buildings at the moment. Maybe you live on the other side of the world and you have no idea when you'll be able to visit our archive centres. But hopefully these things will give you some things to look at in the meantime and some places to explore that you maybe know, you maybe don't know. I'm also going to say that this is in no way a comprehensive list of useful, wonderful websites. So if you know of any others that you think might be of interest to other people, please do put them in the comments. This isn't even a comprehensive list of the websites I use day in, day out, but I wanted to just pull some to talk about. And Leslie, I agree, the smell of an archive is unique, and it's not boosty or musty or anything, it's just wonderful. It's the smell of history. So I'm going to break this talk into several sections. So websites that might be useful for researching people, websites that might be useful for researching places, researching context, how to search in specific organisations' collections, and then just round off at the end by researching archives as a concept, as a subject, and as a career. If any of you are looking at these and going, maybe I could go into this or find out more about how to work with archives. So snippets from all of those things. Okay, the first thing I'm going to say, well, it's not the first thing, but the next thing I'm going to say is that I am not a genealogist. So I'm not going to speak at any length about websites that you can use to trace your family history, as in birth, marriage and death records. You, I'm sure, will be familiar with Ancestry, with Free Birth, Marriage and Death, Find My Past. There's all sorts of really interesting ones and very, very useful ones. Yes, Fiona, I will put a list of some of the websites I'll talk about in the comments when I'm finished, no problem. But the main one I do want to talk about from a genealogical point of view, just from a Scottish perspective, is Scotland's People. Scotland's People is the official Scottish Government website for searching government records and archives. So if you'll be, as I say, familiar with Ancestry, with other ones like that, if you're researching Scottish ancestors, then Scotland's People is absolutely a website you need to be looking at. This is run by the National Records of Scotland, and as I say, it's a Scottish Government-run website. This includes birth, marriage and death records, valuation rolls, wills, census records, and a variety of other things. Scotland's People website is run in collaboration with various other organisations. So it's run with the support of the Court of the Lord Lion, with the Church of Scotland, and with Scottish Catholic Archives. So those organisations have fed in to what sits on Scotland's People, and it is a very, very useful website. What you may be less familiar with, I'm sure that many of you will know this, but what you may be less familiar with is the fact that it also contains very useful information on their guides page. So this is a page about how to use the collections on Scotland's People. So there are guides about different record types, for instance, about statutory registers, about census returns, and how those things were collated and what to use them for. There are also guides on certain topics. So there are tips and hints about how to search for records involving illegitimate births, what words might mean if you come across words or phrases or things that you're unfamiliar with. There are guides in there about what those might mean and what they mean within the context of the document. And there are also guides to research advice. So how to research subjects such as the house that you're interested in, or a particular topic. As some of you will know, and I'm seeing comments coming up about this already, you need to purchase credits to view certificates, but the guides are free to access, to look at, to get an idea of, just to kind of orientate yourself of where to go next and how to use those collections. So it's absolutely invaluable for anyone researching Scottish ancestry, but also it has uses above and beyond the ones people most obviously know. Yes, seeing lots of comments coming in about Scotland's People and how useful it is, and yes, it is a very accessible web and very well organised website, and it's also closed in terms of you can't add to it. So what's there is has been approved and put up there. Okay, so as I said, I'm not going to go into any length about ones to do specifically with birth, marriage and death records, other than I just wanted to highlight that very key one. So what about places? There are all sorts of websites to do with researching Scottish places, and I wanted to pull some of these to talk to you about. So people quite often come to us researching a specific place. It might be where they live, the house that they live in, or a building they're familiar with, or their local area. It might be somewhere associated with their ancestors, and quite often somewhere that they've seen on a map or a certificate on their ancestors, but they don't know really where that place is or where it fits into the wider geography of Scotland. And so I wanted to point you in the direction of some websites that I find particularly useful for searching places in Scotland. So I'm going to start with one of my absolute favourite websites, Archival or not, just a fantastic website. This is Scotland's Places. Now, you'll laugh at this if you have been watching these. You'll know that I can be a little bit enthusiastic sometimes about these collections. My colleague Anne Fraser and I, Anne is our genealogist, were attending Who Do You Think You Are? Conference in Birmingham a couple of years ago, and Scotland's Places had a stand at it, and I was so starstruck. It was like meeting your favourite celebrity. I kind of ran at the poor woman who said she did the website. I was like, I love your website. It's so useful. I think she must She must have thought, good grief, I don't get this very often. So, Scotland's Places. This is a free website to access. The material on the website includes maps, photographs, drawings, tax records, all sorts of things relating to places across Scotland. And the collections on Scotland's Places are drawn from 3 national organisations. They're drawn from Historic Environment Scotland, the National Records of Scotland, and the National Library of Scotland. And the main resource in here that I want to just draw your attention to is the one that I use most frequently, which is the Ordnance Survey Place Name Books. Fantastic resource, absolutely wonderful. The Ordnance Survey Place Name Books were produced to go alongside the first edition Ordnance Survey maps. And I thought, rather than me trying to explain that, I would read to you the description on their website of what the Ordnance Survey name books are. So they have written, Ordnance Survey name books, or original object name books, provide information about place names and building names on the first edition Ordnance Survey mapping which took place in the mid-19th century. The original object name books used in Scotland came in 2 forms, each with a different system of headed columns. The first type, commonly used in surveying and naming the Highland parishes, was essentially a field version of the name book, and it had 5 headings. Received name, so the spelling or the name of the place. Object, so is it a building, is it a natural feature, is it a mountain? Description, so a self-explanatory, a description of the object. The township or parish that it sits in, and the authority for spelling, so who has given evidence to the fact that this is how the place name is spelt. And so the collector, usually an officer of the Ordnance Survey, would consult local historians and etymologists in order to fix the spelling, the received name of each object, natural feature, inhabited place, building, etc. And then there was a second version that was used later on. But these are the ones I want to talk about, the Ordnance Survey place name books. They are absolutely fascinating. If you're interested in the area, all you need to do is go into Scotland's Places website, type in the specific area that you're interested in, the place name. It will tell you which parish it sits in and which county it sits in. So what the historic civil parish and county were, but also now what local authority area it sits in. And that is very, very useful. And this is something I've touched on before in the past, that every place name in the when you're looking at historically, every place sits within a parish and a county, and that's how everything is organised. It's either organised in parish or in county. So that is a very useful thing to know to take you onto where you need to go next to find more information. And as I say, it's split into natural features, so you can find out about why a mountain is called what it is, rivers, things like that, but also buildings and other landmarks, monuments, notable things in the landscape. So basically anything that appears on the map, there will be an entry in the name book to complement it. So as I said, split into counties. These books are split into counties and then into parishes. And just to give you an idea for Highland, I'll read this off my notes because I don't want to get this wrong, but this to give you an idea of the scale of the Highlands. There are 15 volumes for the county of Caithness. There are 7 volumes for the county of Nairnshire. There are 81 volumes for the county of Argyllshire, which some are in Highland. There are 35 volumes for Sutherland. There are 86 volumes for Inverness-shire, and those are split into mainland, Outer Hebrides, and the Isle of Skye. And then there are 187 volumes for Ross and Cromarty County, and these are split between the mainland and the insular areas. So I say that purely to give you an idea of that's the scale of the geographical spread of the Highlands and how much land we cover and how much resource there is within those name books. So as I mentioned, these go along with the first edition Ordnance Survey maps. So the dates vary. Ross and Cromarty about the 1840s, Sutherland about the 1870s. But that general area. And I wanted to read you 3 extracts from these just to show the sorts of information you can find within these. So the first one is Gallows Hill. Gallows Hill is next to Dead Woods in Nairnshire. And it says, under the description column, This name is applied to a small hill on the north side of the road leading from Nairn to Forres, and about 1 mile to the east of Aldern village. It is said to be the place where public executions have taken place, from which circumstance it has been named Gallows Hill. Some time ago, while the farmer of Broombank was trenching the ground near the top of this hill, he came upon human bones at several places along it. There are many places across the country called Gallows Hill for that exact reason, but it just goes to show you, you look at the place name on the map, Gallows Hill, you go to it, these volumes give you more background information. Clachmalach, which is in Cromarty, and Jenny, I'm seeing you saying Ross and Cromarty is your area. I deliberately picked Clachmalach because I know Cromarty is an area you're interested in. And so the description for this says, a large stone situated at the low water and forming one of the boundary stones of the borough. The reason of its having this name is that a young lad, while sitting on it, was overwhelmed by the advancing tide and drowned, and his mother, when told of it, cursed the stone, hence the name Clachmalach, which means a cursed stone. Now, I'm not, as I've said before, I'm not a native Gaelic speaker, so if I have pronounced that wrong, I'm sure someone will tell me. And the third one I wanted to read to you was the description of the county or the area of Lochaber. So this is just to show you that there are some that relate to one stone, there are some that relate to a village, a town, and this one is relating to the entire county of the entire geographical area of Lochaber in the parish of Kilmaneevig. And I just think this is particularly beautifully written, and it's an extract from the Speyside Guide, which was put into these name books. Lochaber, the confluence of the lochs, for it embraces that remarkable line of lochs that have been united in the Caledonian Canal. Lochaber giving name to the deadly axe which is supposed to have been imitated from the weapons of the Danes. Lochaber, connected with all the stirring events of the rule and rebellion of the Lords of the Isles. Lochaber, the most dreary, mountainous and barren district in Scotland, the ultimate retreat of the wolf, the last of which fell by the hand of Lochiel in 1680. Lochaber, where the last stand was so heroically made against the boastful troops of Cromwell. Lochaber, with its gentle Lochiel, who in opposition to his better judgment so chivalrously rushed into rebellion to restore the House of Stuart. Lochaber, the landing place of the young Chevalier, and by a singular coincidence after his brief and checkered career, the very place from which he took his melancholy departure. Lochaber, with its plaintive melody expressive of a breaking heart, which has soothed a Clapperton and Locatu, and has on many other occasions as deeply affected the seat as the Randabach has moved the Swiss. When on leaving his Highland home or wandering on the foreign strand, he has heard the pipes syllabling the melancholy strains of Lochaber no more. Lochaber, with its sons of athletic limb and dauntless heart, with its daughters of finer form and fairer face than ever did Grecian chisel trace. We must now only take a passing glance at its braes and lochs, and so bring our rambles to a close. I just thought that was particularly beautifully written. So name books, fantastic information, fantastic stories. I really do encourage you to have a look at Scotland's Places website. And I mentioned that those accompany the first edition of the Ordnance Survey name books, of the Ordnance Survey maps, sorry. Now, the National Library of Scotland is the place to go for many things. Their National Library of Scotland website contains really interesting and useful links to their collections. They have a moving image archive section, newspapers, journals, things like that. But I wanted to focus on their map resources. So either you can go through the National Library of Scotland website or just type into your search engine NLS maps and it will bring up the maps. There's a wide range of maps on there. Town plans, coastal and admiralty maps, military maps, soil and geology maps, all sorts of things. But mostly what I want to talk about again is the Ordnance Survey maps. Ordnance Survey were split into the first edition and the second edition. The first edition being mid-1800s, second edition being early 1900s, and then split into various sizes. But the most common ones that we use are the 25-inch and the 6-inch editions. Yes, I'm seeing people already saying that it's fantastic for maps. It's such a useful website. Absolutely, again, I'm going to say absolutely invaluable. You can look at specific map sheets for a particular area, but one of the most useful things is that you can overlay historic maps onto present day maps, so you can see how an area has changed. You can put today's mapping alongside a first or second edition Ordnance Survey map side by side, so you can compare, and you can see the development of the places. You can see how a place has changed, how a building shape has changed, which might give you an idea for when something was built. So it's absolutely fascinating, really, really useful. And again, I'll share a link into this in a second. I'm seeing my time is ticking on, so I might run over a little bit today, so I'm sorry. And I'm sorry, Margaret McGinn, who will tell me off if I run over. So statistical accounts. The next thing I wanted to talk to you about was the statistical accounts. Absolutely, again, I'm going to say the same thing again, absolutely fantastic, useful website. So I mentioned these briefly last week, talking about the third edition statistical accounts, which were produced in the 1950s, 60s time. But this week I want to talk about the first and second statistical account. The first statistical account, I'm finding that hard to say for some reason today, was produced in the 1790s. The second statistical account in the 1830s and 40s. There was a third, as I mentioned, but not online. The idea of a statistical account was first suggested in 1790. This was part of the Enlightenment kind of drive for information, drive for knowledge. Any knowledge is good, which is something I say very often. And it was an idea conceived of by Sir John Sinclair. And he described it like this. This will be an inquiry into the state of a country for the purpose of ascertaining the quantum of happiness enjoyed by its inhabitants and the means of its future improvement. So they're trying to find out as much information as they could about the country. And so it was a survey of Scotland's 938 parishes. Questionnaires were sent out by Sir John Sinclair to the parish ministers in each area, and they completed them. Now, the questionnaires had about 170 questions in them. Questions about statistics, how many people had been born in an area recently, how many people were operating below the breadline, things like that, local customs, flora and fauna, industry, illnesses, the church, education in the area, all sorts of really wide-ranging subjects, notable buildings, things like that. And there were a lot of challenges about when they set it out. A lot of ministers didn't want to take part in it or didn't have time. What I thought was absolutely fascinating when I was reading about this was that in the 1790s, a lot of individuals said they didn't want to be giving information about their working life, their statistics, because they felt that that was essentially a breach of data protection. They felt that that was too much power for the state to have over them and too much information about their own life for other people to know, which I thought was very, very interesting. And apparently it was around this time that they first mooted the idea of doing a census, but it was cancelled because there was, for that exact reason, people were not happy with that amount of personal information being divulged to other people, which I thought was really interesting. So I think that's a thing we think is quite modern. So these things were then written up into reports. These questionnaires were written up into reports, and they make fascinating reading. And as I mentioned last week, or one of the viewers mentioned last week, that they can be quite patronising, and that's absolutely true. They very much give an indication of the person who's written them and what their opinions are about things. A second statistical account, as I mentioned, was undertaken 40 years later, and then a third one about 120 years later. And they're all different. They all came across their own problems of creation, but they are all absolutely fantastic insights into a place at a given moment. The complete statistical accounts 1 and 2 are available online, along with the background of the process, how they did it, and a little bit about Sir John Sinclair, who organised it. You click on the map to see the area you want to look at, click on the county you're interested in, and then you'll get a list of the parishes. So you click on the parish and it will tell you that it's got the first account and the second account as well. So that's how you get into that. But again, I will put the link into the comments. And again, there's all sorts of information on there, and as I say, very much indicative of the person who's written them. For instance, Kildonan Parish in Sutherland, from the 1700s was written by Reverend Sage, who was from a very influential and important family of ministers and historians. His entry for the first account for Kildonnan lists the number of cattle, horses, sheep, goats in the area, includes a description of the church, when the church was built, the sort of things that are practiced in the area, description of a battle between Danish chieftains that took place, descriptions of the tombs and tumuli that can be found in the parish. So, really wide range of information. The Applecross one includes information about the sorts of occupations that people do, and it starts with that section starts with the sentence: "In a country destitute of trade and manufacture, distinct occupations are not to be expected. All the inhabitants are in some degree fishers and farmers. Every man is the architect of his own house. And although there are a few nominal shoemakers, scarcely a boy of 15 but makes his own brogues." So great contextual information about people's lives, social history. The Applecross one also talks about how the importance of witchcraft, second sight, the evil eye, and how that's still believed by people in the area. The Duranish one from Skye has an extensive history of the MacLeods in it, and information about the history of Dunvegan Castle and the fairy flag, all sorts of things. But I wanted to read to you an extract from the first statistical account from Alvey Parish, which is the area that covers Aviemore, sort of towards Kingussie, but not quite including Kingussie. So this is a section entitled Morals, etc. It is very uncommon to have any recourse to the sheriff, much less to the justiciary court. Any difference arising is settled by the justices of the peace for the district. Only one suicide has been heard of. They are much addicted to drinking of whisky, whence at their public meetings, such as funerals, etc., squabbles are frequent. Their fondness for spirits is owing to the easy access of it, there being no less than 13 houses in this parish where drams are sold without a county or excise licence, to the very great prejudice of the purse, constitution, and morals of the natives. Such a nuisance to society is overlooked by the proper officer, on account of the troubles and distance from the county town, and the proprietors also residing at a distance. So this is what I mean, that there are sometimes opinions from the people who have written it. But you can see the change in knowledge in there as well. So between the first and second, you can see how what people knew changed. A reminder before I go into the next section that this is brought to you by High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer. That High Life Highland is a charity registered in Scotland, and that there's no payment or subscription required to take part in the Learn With Lorna series. But if you're able to donate towards our work, we would very much appreciate that. So that's some about places, and I wanted to mention some that give context about people's lives. There are a huge number of very, very useful websites here, and I'm not going to go into them all, but I wanted to just quickly run through the names of some that might be of interest to you that explain daily life in institutions, the history of significant buildings, things like that. So there is the British Listed Buildings website. If there's a particular building you're interested in, that will tell you a little bit about it, when it became listed. Canmore is another website which will give you fantastic information about any given site or place. Institution-wise, there's a fantastic website called workhouses.org.uk. Now, as I've mentioned before, we didn't have workhouses in Scotland, we had poor houses, but it's a similar thing. And the website workhouses.org gives you fantastic information about what daily life would have been like in these institutions as a general thing, but also goes into legislation behind the construction of the poor houses and gives information about each individual poor house that's to be found within each area. So very, very useful if you're interested in the poor relief system. There are similar ones to do with asylums and mental health as well. Two local ones which I use a lot are the History of Highland Hospitals, which is produced by a series of books produced by Jim and Steve Leslie, which talks about the development of each hospital within the Highlands. And another one, Slaves and Highlanders, by the very extremely knowledgeable David Alston, which talks about the influence of the slave trade and the Caribbean plantation ownership on the development of the Highlands. So those give kind of context about how life developed in the Highlands and the impacts on different people's lives. And the other one, just to throw in at that moment as well, is the British Newspaper Archive. If you haven't used that, that's a fantastic website that will give a vast amount of information. And again, contextual. Have a browse through an area, a newspaper for an area, you'll find all sorts of things. Great as well if you've got someone who in your family who had an unusual death or an unusual incident, you may well find that there's reference to that within the British Newspaper Archive. All of them give kind of background information and insights into their own particular areas of expertise, but they give you an idea of just life generally at a given time. Very, very useful. And as I said, this is just some examples of the many that I use and that I could tell you more about. I would also encourage having a look at Museums and Heritage Highland website. This is an organisation that kind of gathers and compiles information from independent museums and heritage organisations across the Highlands. I would also encourage you, if you're interested in a particular area, to look for the local organisations there. There will be community archives, there will be local history groups, museums, things like that, and they will have local knowledge. Is always good. Local knowledge is always absolutely key. So those places will be able to tell you more as well. Many of the collections that are held within these independent museums and organisations can also be seen on Highlife Highland's website, Ambala. I've talked about Ambala before. This is the Highland History and Culture website, originally set up by the Highland Council and some other partners, but now run by Highlife Highland. Ambala was founded in 2000, and it was founded to be a digital archive of the history and culture of the Highlands and Islands. So the Ambala holds information from our collections, so it holds copies of documents from within the Highland Archive Service collections, but also from a wide range of other archives, museums, libraries, private individuals, people who have maybe contacted my colleague Jamie, who runs Ambala, to say that they've got something in their house and would he like it to be digitised to be part of the website. So there are tens of thousands of things on, thanks Andrea, tens of thousands of items on Ambala. It's a bilingual website, so everything that is on Ambala is there in English and Gaelic as well. And many of the collections that I've spoken about in the past few weeks, like the Duncan Macpherson collection, can be found on there. If you want to know more about Ambala and how it runs, then and how it operates, then if you have a look back on our YouTube channel or on our Facebook page to our Doors Open Days interviews in September, you'll see my interview with my colleague Jamie Gockroger, who runs Ambala, and he talks a little bit about that. So that's a Highland one, but on a national level, a very similar type of website is the website called Scran. This has over 400,000 images, films, documents, articles, things like that, from around 300 collections across Scotland. It's, again, a very, very useful website. As I say, a similar kind of way to search as Ambala, but on a wider geographical level. And again, I will put links to all of these things in there, but Scran is a very, very useful website and a lovely team that we work with quite often. There are also individual organisations collections, and I just wanted to highlight a couple of those just so that you know that they exist. So the National Archives in Kew in London, the UK National Archives, they hold UK-wide and English documents. They're the National Archive for the whole of the United Kingdom. But on their website, if you have a look, there's a section called Discovery. This is very, very useful. Discovery, TNA Discovery, is UK-wide. So it records, it has a list of the documents that are held in 2,500 archives across the UK. So our collections at Highland Archive Service will appear on the National Archives Discovery page. So you search there. If you're interested in a particular subject, it will tell you all the archives that have something that might be of interest. And all the archives in the UK every year report back if they've had new collections come in, then that these get reported into to the National Archives so that that can be added into one kind of comprehensive list. And as I say, 2,500 archives. They also, again, have research guides on there about all sorts of subjects, from the impact of the war to changing legislation, all sorts of things. So again, do have a look at the research guides on the TNA website. I'm seeing lots of comments coming up about other websites. That's great. Please carry on doing that. It's really useful for people to see. And yes, the Mitchell, a wonderful place of all sorts of information. The National Records of Scotland, and I mentioned previously the National Library of Scotland website as well, but the National Records of Scotland is the Scottish National Archive, so it holds Scotland-wide national records. Their catalogues are online, so you can search what they hold. And again, they're another one that have partnerships with organisations such as the Church of Scotland. They hold the court records for Scotland, things like that. And again, and from a personal point of view, probably the most useful set of guides that I use. They have a very big comprehensive list of how to use different types of records in their collections. So court records, immigration, where to look if you're interested in military records, how the High Court system worked, things like that. Very, very useful research guides on the NRS website, so please do have a look at that. And obviously there are individual archives as well, and many of them will have their catalogues online, or at least will have a contact detail where you can contact them and see if they have anything. And even if you can't see their catalogue online, certainly the staff will be able to advise what they have. If you have a look at the Scottish Council on Archives website, the SCA website, that has a map of Scotland, and you can pinpoint all the different archives that exist on there as well. So that will maybe give you if you don't know where to look to find an archive in the area you're interested in, the Scottish Council on Archives map, interactive map, will be a place to start. And then I wanted to round off just by talking about our own website. So the Highland Archive Service website has information about all 4 of our offices, has information about events that we run, things like that, but now also has our catalogues online. It lists many of the collections that we have, not absolutely all, but many of them. And it'll tell you a little bit about the item, which office it's held in, things like that. So please do have a look at our online catalogues on our website. As you'll know, it was a huge moment when we got them on. A vast amount of work to put thousands of items up there, and a lot of work from a lot of people, but notably my wonderful colleague Debbie, who I know I've mentioned before. Very useful, our catalogues and also other archives catalogues, to browse ahead of visiting or making an inquiry, so that you go in kind of informed about what's likely to be there or what might be of use to you. So please do have a look at that. And then I just wanted to round off by saying, if you're interested in the subject generally of archives as a wider subject, as a career, if you know a young person who might be interested, there are 3 websites just to point you to. One is the Archive and Record Association. That's the leading professional body for archivists, conservators and records managers across the UK and Ireland, so that the Archive and Record Association, the ARA. Explore Your Archive website, which contains information about its purpose is to give archives a way to reach out into the community, so to encourage people to explore and visit their own local archive. And then, as I mentioned, the Scottish Council on Archives, which is the umbrella organisation for archives in Scotland, is also a very useful website. Again, guides, films about what archives are, why we keep them, why they're important. So I'm going to stop talking. I've run over by 9 minutes, so I'm sorry about that. Thank you so much for joining me. I really hope that that's given you some places to look, maybe some websites you didn't know about. And as I say, all of those, the likes of Scran and Ambala are fantastic, wonderful resources in their own right. But I also hope that some of these things will give you a route into visiting an archive and being a little bit more armed about what's out there or how to research a particular topic. So I really hope that that's been helpful to you. And yes, please do continue to share any other resources that you think might be of use to the other people watching. A reminder that the series is brought to you by High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer, that High Life Highland is a charity registered in Scotland, and that there is no charge payment or subscription required to take part in this event. But if you're able to donate towards us, then we very much appreciate that. I hope you can join me next week. Next week is already looking very, very popular. Lots of people showing interest. We're looking at children in the Victorian poor relief records. So I hope you can join me next week. And in the meantime, I hope you have a lovely remainder of your week and a lovely weekend. Thanks.